Hello, welcome everybody. So today we're going to be looking at creativity and getting it in the boardroom. I think in a global marketplace, businesses need brands more than ever to connect with customers, create experiences, even new products and services. And how do we create a brand? Well, it's with emotions. And how do we create emotions? Well, it's really with creativity and design. So how do we get creativity in the boardroom? But before I start, how many of you here want to be in the boardroom? Raise your hand.
Yes, good
Great,
number.
a few of you, lovely. Well, it's a tough question, how do we get creativity in the boardroom? At least I thought it was, until I found Janet, who is going to help us answer all those questions and more. But first of all, really, really quick intro so people can understand your background and why you can talk about commercial creativity with me today.
Okay, so I've spent half my career inside brands, so working for some big brands, Coca-Cola for the first kind of 7-8 years of my career, and then latterly Sony for 15 years. And the last 5 years at Sony, I was their communications investment director. So I've sat on the other side, managing a budget of hundreds of millions, so I know what being inside a brand is like. And I've been at director level inside brands. And then I jumped ship and I joined WPP as their chief financial officer at Grey London, and latterly that became Grey Europe, Middle East Africa, and then Y&R VML globally, and I was their chief commercial officer. So I've had experience inside brands, sitting inside the boards because I was a board advisor at Sony, and I've obviously experienced it on the other side. So I've kind of been there. I've seen it from many different angles, so I'm going to hopefully share some insight and some encouragement today to help you guys get there.
Great. Well, okay, I'm going to kick off with my first question, which is, how do we get the boardroom to be less boring and more creative?
Oh, why do we think the boardroom is boring is my first challenge. You know, if I go back to my Sony boardroom when I was kind of director of corporate planning and strategy, so working closely with the chief exec and being in that boardroom, I can only describe it as one of the most dynamic, exciting, yes, scary at times, don't get me wrong, but really challenging environments. It was certainly never boring. It was flipping tough at times, but it was exciting. And I can only say to you all that they are certainly not boring places, but what they are doing is talking about business. And that includes marketing and creativity. Boards do, largely anyway, value creativity. They wouldn't spend the millions that they do spend on marketing if they didn't. So I think we have to kind of reset our own understanding. And just because boards feel big and scary and maybe a long way away, we need to embrace them, understand them, and realize that they're not boring, they're not scary, but what language are they speaking, and how can we make sure we're talking to them or giving our boss the stuff they need to talk to them in the language of business, which I'm afraid is words and numbers.
It's interesting that you say that creativity is valued in the boardroom, because I don't know if any of you saw Hegarty on LinkedIn last week, and he was talking about, he'd shared Mark Ritson's research on the Cannes winners and the uncomfortable truth that most of them weren't effective. And he was like, let's be clear, creativity is not decoration, it's a business tool. But I think it must be very hard to get the boardroom to understand creativity and the business impact when we have a whole festival that's not answering that question.
No, it's very true. I mean, if I was the CFO of any brand and I happened to see, and I read the same article, Hegarty's paper, or Ritson's paper, saying that most, I think something like 80% of the work that was creatively awarded at Cannes was not effective, I would be sharpening my pencil and definitely saying, how much are we spending? Oh my God, well, are you telling me 80% of that isn't effective? And then I'd be ready to jump in and audit it and send people in. So if you are inside a brand, if you haven't got somebody like it was a newly created role, a communications investment, I'm using that word deliberately, investment director, working inside your marketing function, helping you not just manage or procure, but value the benefit of what you're doing and report that back inside your business, I would be worried because your CFO is going to send the auditors in. And, you know, I don't want to give auditors a bad name, but, you know, they're coming at it through a different lens. We have to put the lens of value in front of us and kind of go, if this was my money, how would I be proving or demonstrating, articulating in words and numbers why what we're investing in marketing is value for money and it's delivering the results we set it out to do. So we have to stop playing the victim and actually almost write a brief that says, how do we solve this problem? How do we communicate differently to the boardroom about the value of what we do?
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question to you, is about what needs to change. Like, the industry is talking a lot about blandification. We know that AI, that's going to really accelerate that. And my question was initially going to be, is the boardroom going to be a blocker for brands being more creative? But actually, is it creatives who are going to be the blocker for brands being more creative?
It's a really interesting way of sort of changing the angle on that question, because I think creative, when I jumped across and joined Adland and production companies, I was shocked at how lacking in commercial skills the sector is. Because when you're inside a business, you understand the P&L, you understand the language of business. And you can't stand up. I couldn't stand up at Sony and present a budget about the N 150 million we were going to spend with my creative partner without having some form of justification or explanation about why we were spending it, what would come from spending it, and speaking that language. So I think what needs to change is creative businesses, agencies, or in-house operations need to embrace what they do, why they do it, and the impact and outcome of what they're doing, and dial up the reporting and analysis of that. It isn't always easy, but today it's easier than it's ever been because we have so many other metrics and tools to help us. And make sure you're giving that as much importance and weight as you are creativity, because then good CFOs know that investing in the brand is essential. Honda, Tesco's, lots of the big brands spend hundreds of millions, and we sort of forget that. CFOs wouldn't allow that if they didn't believe it was valuable, but they need to know why and how, and make sure that the function's being accountable for that money.
Yeah, but we have a tension because, like you say, they know it's valuable, businesses know that they need to spend on marketing, but isn't it the first line that gets deleted when a business is in trouble? It's the first line they go to make cost savings.
It isn't always the first line. I mean, I think with technology changes coming all the time, everything is under question and under challenge. Sorry, I'm losing my mic here. You have to be ahead of that curve. You have to make sure that you I don't like the word justify, but you can explain what it is you're spending and why. And excuse me, guys, this has just fallen off my ear, so I'm just pushing it back on my ear. See, I never sit still.
These swivel chairs are dangerous.
I know, they are dangerous, aren't they? You know, most brands spend between 3 and 5% of sales on advertising. So look at some annual reports and you'll soon see what that figure adds up to. You know, what are you spending on it? How are you spending it? Can you justify it clearly? I'm okay now, aren't I? Or is it up in my face? It's up in my face. Thank you. And make sure you can explain that to your head of marketing or the sales and marketing chief who's on the board, because if he sees that, he will want to present that to the CFO and the board to explain what he's doing and why he's doing it. And you know, we'll come on to talk about the Sony Balls ad, but you have to do that. And if you can't, then you need to up your commercial skills. And you need to understand the fundamentals of finance, business, P&Ls, adopt some of that language and stop talking about cost and reducing budgets and start talking about investment and outcomes. And, you know, what will doing this drive in terms of customers' reactions, customers' reach, customers' cut-through. And use your partners, your research partners, your analyst partners to help you have great charts, great analysis so that you can demonstrate that as well as showing the brilliant work that you're doing. And for me, Cannes has to become more commercially accountable as well as creative.
Are we not telling the right stories? Because I feel like a lot of, there's a need for ROI, there's a need of data. Like recently I saw Rob Alderton at Design Week was celebrating Ragged Edge, who are amazing amazing branding agency and how there was a return to adding metrics to case studies, but it kind of jarred with me a bit because they had a stat that the rebrand had resulted in a £250 million valuation. I looked at that and I was like, there's so much more context to that. And actually, what we haven't done is really explain the value of the brand, because Ragged Edge did a lot more than that in terms of creating a brand, connecting to customers. So do you think we're telling the wrong stories? It's not just about serving up the metrics.
Yes. Well, you have to connect the stories. As you know, Emma, I've coined this phrase, commercial creativity, a long while ago, and it's really good to see it living in everyday culture now. So you have to develop a commercial and creative culture, and you have to think about your stakeholders, and if the CFO or if the CEO or the sales director even is in that boardroom, they're all fighting for money. You know, they all want more because they're all being challenged to do more. So I'm sorry, but you've got to be able to present your business case for why investing in the brand to do all of these things is as important or more important than spending some money on a few new fleet of vehicles, because those are the choices that are happening and the discussions happening inside a boardroom. And if you are able to show that the N millions or the hundreds of thousands that we've invested in a brand have done this for the brand, or done this for our customer base, done this for impact, then you will get the money. You know, it isn't that there isn't money in a business, but there's a lot of people queuing up to get more of it. So you've got to fight for it. So yes, don't just think about talking about what you're doing or being the colouring in department. What are your business goals with that marketing budget this year? What are you aiming to achieve? And when you present your business plan, don't just talk about the cost centre that you're part of. Talk about the investment you're making in marketing, the customers, the changes you're going to bring about, so that everybody in that boardroom sees it as an investment. And if you are using that language, you will be perceived as a business person, a creative business person. That's what will get you into the board. You've got to not just talk about creativity on its own, but talk about the value of investing in creativity. Then you'll be seen as a business person who can make a difference to the brand.
Is that a conflict with creativity, though? Because I can see there's a taste conversation that's coming back around AI, which is great, but it worries me a bit, right? I have 30 years industry experience. I feel like the taste conversation when I came into the industry made sense, because we were the tastemakers because our clients weren't seeing what we were doing and what we were creating. But the challenge is it got us in the pickle of where we are now, where you would have the ECD selling something in, we'd have a lot of swagger, we'd have the ta-da moment. And I'm like, are those days over in this new era of commercial creativity?
God, I hope not. I absolutely hope not. And I don't believe they are. You know, for the first time in the last year, you're starting to see procurement even talking about the importance of creativity, because creativity is a differentiator. You know, we can all remember a great ad. And the one I'm going to talk quickly about is the Sony Balls ad. I mean, hopefully everybody in this room is aware of that ad and all of the takeoffs of that ad. Well, selling that into the board took some doing. And I think it still would today. The Gorilla ad is much the same. I mean, it means you have to earn trust. And I know that we had to go all the way to the ultimate board in Japan, in Sony, and present that plan. And it didn't even have a television in it. So the Sony board were like going, why and how is this going to sell more televisions? You know, we're about to launch Bravia, our new TV brand, and chucking however many hundreds of thousands coloured balls down a street in San Francisco is going to promote our televisions. And it was tricky, it was sticky, it was brave. But it actually, in the end, came down to Sir Howard Stringer, who was the chair, looking at the board and saying to the board, look, I trust this guy. He's done amazing work for PlayStation. It's changed the brand's value immensely. We should do it. But God, we then had to make sure we did do it. And as we all know, that ad went global. We had 2 follow-ups, Paint and the Bunnies. And, you know, our reputation internally then was, trust them. They do amazing work that drives business results. So you have to earn that trust.
Yes.
And you have to take risks.
Well, you do, but the boardroom is a very risky place.
Yes.
So are we almost trying to be too creative? I can imagine if you're constantly knocking at the door and presenting and doing the ta-da moment, that actually you're just going to end up with a very nervous boardroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was agency side, I remember our annual review with a big pharmaceutical company, and the MD and I were going through how we'd done this year, tick, 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 tick. And we got to the end of the meeting, and the MD said to the client, "So anything else you wanted to bring up?" And, you know, the MD sensed that they were sitting on something they wanted to say. And we said, "Come on, I mean, even if it's horrible, it's important." And actually, we had done a load of brave work for, I'm going to have to share the brand, aren't I? But the Lucasade brand, which that pharmaceutical company at that point owned. Really world-breaking work. Almost campaign after campaign after campaign that year. And the marketing head said to us, "Could we just agree next year not to push the envelope quite so much? Because I'm getting some heat, because I'm always asking for more money, or I'm also always going down the sofa to find some money to do these great things, because they're all amazing. But you're beginning to do my internal integrity and budget management some bad news. It's as though I don't plan properly." And so we had to work out with them how to still do great, brave work, but how to manage a plan for a year so that we agreed when we'd go an extra mile or be wild or mad or even bigger and crazier, and when we would just make sure we'd do a good job within a budget, because you can't always ask for more. It comes across as irresponsible. I mean, we're all parents. We wouldn't just keep giving our kids more sweets or more money every week. It's about balance.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're so close to time, Janet. I knew we would be, and I always like to close these things with, you know, some kind of, we curated 3 top tips that we wanted to give you for getting creativity in the boardroom. So the first top tip we had was about being creative and commercial, which you've emphasized today. The second tip was about taking time to build creative trust that will allow you to take those bigger risks that could lead to that bigger, brave work. And the third one was about really picking those moments carefully about when you are trying to be creative. But just one final takeaway for the audience today, Janet, what would be your advice?
One final takeaway is read your company's, or if you're an agency, the brand that you're working on's annual report. Now, you might now yawn and think, what boring? But honestly, they're not boring reports, and they will tell you so much about the challenges, the objectives, the goals they're facing in the next year, what they've got to return to shareholders. There is so much information that's highly valuable to marketing and creativity in their board report. Read it. Then when you're either presenting internally, or if you're an agency or production company presenting to the brand, you can contextualize the work that you're coming up with in the context of how it will help the brand achieve its business goals, because you've been reading the annual report, and immediately you'll come across as much more business savvy, helping them do what they've already said they need to do. So go and read your company's annual report, or the brands you work for's annual reports. I mean, the Procter & Gamble ones, all of the big ones, have got all of their goals and challenges spelt out, and they're exciting documents.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Janet. Please do check out the podcast if you want to know more about commercial creativity. I'm interviewing Janet. It will be out in a couple of months, but we have lots of conversations about that. Thank you, Janet, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today.